a home in Antwerp, Belgium, early in the morning. Woke up hearing the bombs fall, the explosions around the neighborhood. My mom looked out the window and she told me she was almost hit by a shrapnel from one of those bombs. And it was a beautiful morning. Sun was out. And usually my mom and I would go out in the morning and take a little walk. It was a Friday morning, so we would go to the Jewish bakery and buy the challah, the braided bread, which we broke to begin the Jewish Sabbath Friday night. That all ended immediately. And then from there, we stayed in our apartment for 3 days. We didn't have a car, and we had to wait for a taxi to pick us up. We left everything behind, the photographs, everything. Just took a suitcase full of clothes and a few blankets, and we drove to the coast, along the English Channel, and the taxi driver dropped us off, and we were there with hundreds of thousands of refugees already fleeing because they also invaded Holland and Luxembourg at the same time as they did Belgium. And we went through quite a lot. The German planes came zooming down at treetop level, shooting at us with their machine guns. And we finally, crossed into France, northern France, and they continued to shoot at us at one point when we were in Calais. My mom told me that she threw me into a ditch and she covered me with her body. Luckily, we all survived, and we went, continued to go down. Outside of Abbeville, a French town, medieval town, beautiful churches, we were picked up by a truck, which included other refugees, and that was in May of 1940. All of this happened in May of 1940. And a couple of years ago, I went on the internet and I discovered a photograph of that truck and of us on it. Amazing. And saw myself with my big brother, Sammy, and I show that to students kind of to verify that I was there, I'm telling you the truth. At 3.5 years old, going through all of that stuff. And finally, we made it down into the southern part of France, and stayed in a little hotel in various places. At one point, a farmer saw us walking the street and told us that we could hide out in his barn. We hid out in the barn and went into, finally, a village in the southern part of France, near the Pyrenees Mountains. And we slept in the school gymnasium for a little bit. Had to leave in the morning because the kids were coming to school. And so the mayor didn't like us loitering around town, doing nothing. One morning, about a week later, after we arrived there, he ordered the French police to take us out and told us that he was going to transport us to other villages nearby, and took us to the Holocaust Museum refers to it as a concentration camp. It wasn't a killing camp, it was an internment camp, a holding camp, from where Jews were eventually deported to Auschwitz. we were fortunate. We were in this camp. My mom and I were in one part of the camp, and my brother Sammy and Leo were with my father in another part of the camp. My mother was afraid that we would never see each other again. My brother Sammy, he was 16 years old, 13 years older than me. He escaped from the camp. And he went to a nearby town and found a village mayor who he thought he could help Sammy out to get his family released from the camp. But the mayor told him that he couldn't do anything, but gave him a name of a French official in a nearby town in Po, where we were sleeping in the school gymnasium. Told Sammy to go to his office and talk to him. So at 16 years old, Sammy went up to talk to this French official who was in charge of the region, which included the camp, Camp Gurs, G-U-R-S. And Sammy had told me that the official took pity on him and signed some documents, gave it to Sammy to take back to the camp to show the commandant of the camp, ordering the commandant to release the entire family. So our journey continued, went to numerous little villages, hiding out all the time. At one point, we hid out in an abandoned castle. And we eventually ended up around September of 1940 in Marseille. And we lived in a little hotel for about a month or so, until October of 1940, when the new French government, referred to as the Vichy government because they had their capital in Vichy. France was divided into two after it surrendered to Germany. The upper part was controlled by the Nazis and the lower part was controlled by the Vichy government, and they became collaborators with the Nazis and making life difficult for the Jewish people. And that started to occur in October of 1940 when they passed some laws against the Jewish people. Foreign Jews could be arrested just for being Jewish and taken to internment camps such as Gurs, and there were a number of them in the southern part of France. And the Jews who were citizens of France, they lost their jobs, properties were confiscated, lawyers and doctors couldn't practice their profession, teachers were fired from their profession, Jewish, all Jewish teachers. And so we fled from there to Nice, in the French Riviera. And it became, for thousands, tens of thousands of Jews, a safe haven, because that part of France, that sliver bordering Italy, was controlled by the Italians. When France surrendered to Germany, Mussolini, the Italian dictator, decided, he wanted to take part in the action. So he invaded the French Riviera. And fortunately for us, the Italian diplomats who administered that area were friendly to the Jewish people. They protected us from the Nazis, from the French police, for about a year and a half. We lived in a hotel where the Italians had their council, and my two older brothers knew the officials who ran the council. They were friendly to us, I became friendly with a military attaché, an Italian military attaché. And it was safe for a while. I mean, we did have to watch what we're doing because occasionally the French police would come into the hotel to talk to the Italian diplomats, as well as Nazi officials. I remember seeing a Nazi official coming into the hotel in July of 1942, ostensibly to pressure the Italians in giving up the lists of Jews who lived in the area. There was a census that was taken the year before, and they refused to do so. So that was the beginning of the Nazis and the French police rounding up Jews all over France, including the southern part of France where we lived. And, you know, you had to have an amazing story to tell, because only through an amazing story that you were able to survive. So, on August the 25th, a young man comes running to the hotel, sees my father downstairs in the garden, tells him we have to leave immediately because the police was going to raid the hotel the next morning. How did he know that? This young man, who was a distant relative of my dad. You know, there were relatives who ended up in the same areas. There was a policeman himself who told this young man, tell whoever you know to leave immediately. And I would talk about that to students. I mentioned that in the framework of, here is a man who had the moral courage to stand up for what he believed in, risking his own life, perhaps, to save some Jewish lives. And I tell these kids, you know, someday you may face a situation where you have to make a decision to fight for justice and peace, or just to be a bystander. And perhaps that decision could very well determine the nature of your life forever. And that's how I try to make an impact to students. And so an Italian Catholic family hid us out for 6 weeks at his home. My dad knew him because my dad was a gambler, and there was a beautiful casino off the Mediterranean Sea in Nice. I became friendly with this Italian Catholic man, called him up, asked whether we could hide out. And he came over immediately that day before the raid, picked us up and took us to his home. My mom and dad, they were hidden out in the basement of the home. My brother Leo and I lived upstairs with them. My brother Sammy, who, by the way, is still alive. He's 93 years old, lives in New York. At that time, he was about 18 years old. He himself escaped to Portugal in the spring of 1942. So here we are in this apartment. One day, I go to school. The family enrolled me in a Catholic school. My first experience, I remember the teacher looking at me all the time. But I only went one day because my mom was afraid that, you know, maybe somebody in school would tell that there was a Jewish kid there and the police would come and grab me away. So that was my experience. We were there for about 6 weeks until the end of September of 42, near the end, and the family became afraid, the Catholic family. They became afraid that somebody in the neighborhood would tell on them that they were hiding a Jewish family. So the Catholic gentleman, they drove us to the train station, and from there we went to Grenoble, along the French Alps. Took a train. Didn't take anything with us, but for one thing, I wanted to bring my bike with me, my first two-wheeler. I board the train, and as I board the train, a policeman comes and grabs my bike away. So we took the train to Grenoble, stopped there for about a week, and we hid in a Catholic convent. There were Catholic nuns who were trying to help, Jewish people escape into Switzerland. And this group of sisters helped us escape into Switzerland with the help of a smuggler who we had to pay. So we took a train from Grenoble up to a little French village not too far away from Geneva, and met the smuggler, and in the middle of the night we walked through fields, farm fields, and we got to the border, Swiss border guard, and the border guard tells us that he would only allow people who had relatives living in Switzerland. And there were a group of other, Jews with us. And those who didn't have any relatives couldn't cross into Switzerland. And in the middle of the night, there were trucks rumbling through the area with French policemen on them. They were hunting for Jews trying to escape into Switzerland. My mother's mother, my grandmother, lived in Switzerland. How did that happen? Years ago, when my mom was a teenager, her mother was a young widow, and she met a man from Switzerland, a traveling salesman in Germany. They lived in Germany after the World War I. Fell in love with her and asked her to come to Switzerland with him. But there was a condition. He didn't want her daughter to go. And so the grandmother, my grandmother-to-be, made the decision to start a new life, and go with him to Switzerland and placed my mother in a Jewish orphanage home. I never knew that really until decades later, when my niece, her granddaughter, she confided to her what happened. We were allowed to cross into Switzerland. The border guard let us through. Of course, the border guards called the police station in Zurich, where my grandmother lived, to verify that my mother was telling the truth. And so we were first taken to we weren't free yet. We were taken to a displaced persons camp after we were allowed through to get into Switzerland. My father was in one camp. My brother Leo and me and my mom were in another displaced persons camp. I was only there with Leo for about 3 months until around February of '43. We crossed into Switzerland exactly October 1, 1942. So around February, some Jewish service agencies came into town, into the camp, and asked the mothers whether they would allow their children to live with families in Switzerland, and live a normal life and go to school. And my mom said yes. You know, she was tired. You know, I could understand that she really needed a break. And so I lived with a foster family in one town, and my brother lived with a foster family in another town. Unfortunately, the foster family I lived with had a son who abused me. I was then 6 years old, almost 7 years old then. And that was hard, tough. I forgot about it, though. You know, many years later, it came back to me, what happened. And I guess those experiences, you know, from the beginning on to the time that I reunited with my family in Zurich, living with our grandmother, you know, had an effect on me. Afraid of people, didn't trust anybody. And that went through my teenage years in America. Didn't want to make any friends. I was afraid of being harmed. And it took a long time for me to overcome that fear with the help of, you know, professionals. And so, in 1946, early 46, we came to America on a Liberty ship. Went back to Belgium, recovered some of the things that the neighbors held for us, which included photo albums. And we were then, took us 3 weeks to get to Norfolk, Virginia. That's where we landed, at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, crossing the Atlantic Ocean. And we were processed there and taken to a train station. And at the train station, we waited for, you know, the train to come in, take us to New York. In the meantime, my brother Leo and I were outside. It was a beautiful day, resting on a bench. And I went to the bathroom, and I walked into a bathroom. And I met an elderly gentleman, skin, you know, darker than I had ever seen before. And when I walked out, I saw a young man talking to my brother. I immediately thought, uh-oh, something is happening. So I asked my brother, and he told me I walked into the wrong bathroom. I walked into a colored-only bathroom. So here I am, setting foot on American soil the first day, and I realized that there are a group of Americans who are being persecuted. And that really put, I think, the final chapter to rest for me. Because when I became a newspaper reporter in Connecticut, in New Haven, it was during the time of the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, you know, converging at the same time. And I wrote about that. And I have to tell you, I wrote about a story of some young blacks who wanted to end political discrimination. There were no blacks who were represented on the city council of 30 people. And I wrote a big story about that. That was in 1966. In 2011, I received a letter from one of those young blacks, you know, my age, and thanking me for what I did 45 years later. And I talk about that to kids, telling, you know, sometimes you don't know whether you're making a difference. And I never really did know, you know. I didn't remember. But he reminded me in the letter that soon after there were blacks elected to the city council, and one black young man ran for mayor. So I make a difference. That's my mission with young people. And if I could, I'd like to read a letter from one of those kids from Vampy, if I'm permitted to. She wrote me a letter soon after, almost about a week before the program ended in the summertime. Vampy is a summer program for gifted children, and that is administered by Western Kentucky University's Center for Gifted Children. And this is what she wrote. I would like to sincerely thank you for the life-changing experience you allowed me to have. I was part of the Nazi Germany and Holocaust Vampy class that you spoke to. Hearing your story of courage and faith will forever impact my life. Seeing your baby shoes opened my eyes to a whole new world. When you pulled out those shoes, I immediately went back home. I went to my brother's crib. I went to his infant days. I went to his little white baby shoes that still hang off of his dresser to this day. I imagine him walking through the streets of Belgium, riding and hiding. My brother passed away due to SIDS when he was 5 months old. Your baby shoes set something off inside of me. I finally understood what the Holocaust is all about. It's not about numbers or facts or statistics. It's about the stories. It's about the lives of real, actual people. It's about the bravery and morality displayed by common, everyday people. When I asked you who gave you hope during this time, you responded by saying, I was a strong kid. That statement alone immensely filled me with hope and inspiration. I know that if you can come through such an atrocity with even stronger faith, I can as well. I've struggled a lot with losing my brother, and thanks to you, I know that I can do it. I know that the human spirit truly is stronger than anything that can happen to it. I know that God is in control, and He has greater plans. So I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate you. Your story will stay with me for as long as I live. Your wish to make a difference definitely came true for me. I could never repay you for the major impact you've made in my life.